Victor Harrison had never truly felt the weight of his wealth. Not the endless piles of money, the sprawling estates, or the high-powered meetings. No, the heaviest burden he carried was the absence of his daughter, Isabel, who had disappeared without a trace 25 years ago during a family vacation. The memory of that fateful day haunted him more than any financial deal ever could. It had been a family trip to the mountains, a quiet getaway that turned into the darkest chapter of his life. Isabel, then just a 12-year-old girl, had vanished from their cabin one afternoon. The authorities had searched the surrounding forests, the nearby town, and even conducted aerial sweeps. But nothing. No evidence, no leads, just the quiet, suffocating certainty that she was gone forever. Victor's life had never been the same. His marriage to his wife, Julia, crumbled under the strain. The business empire they had built together became his only solace, though it often felt hollow without the laughter and warmth of his daughter filling their mansion. Isabel's disappearance remained an open wound, festering as the years dragged on. The house, once filled with joy, now felt like an empty shell, a constant reminder of what he had lost. Despite hiring private investigators and exhausting every avenue of inquiry, the mystery of Isabel's disappearance never yielded any answers. Over time, Victor made the painful decision to sell the family ranch, the place where they had once spent happy days together. It felt like giving up, but it also felt like the only way to finally move on. Or so he thought. Now, years later, Victor found himself standing in the middle of a farm in California, staring at a dilapidated barn. The property had been brought to his attention as part of a new business venture, and despite the unsettling circumstances surrounding it, Victor couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm here. The land seemed peaceful, but something about it felt eerily familiar. The air was thick with the scent of earth and hay, but there was an undercurrent of tension, as though secrets lingered beneath the surface. His instincts told him that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. As he walked around the farm, inspecting the property for its potential, Victor's thoughts kept drifting back to Isabel. He couldn't escape her. The memories of her were still vivid in his mind. The way she had laughed, the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of her dreams. He wondered where she was now, what had happened to her. The pain was still fresh, no matter how many years had passed. When Victor entered the barn, he noticed a young woman working alone. She was tending to the animals, her back to him as she moved from one stall to the next. He didn't think much of it at first, until he saw her pendant, a simple silver necklace with a delicate charm. But there was something about it that caught his attention, a pendant that seemed all too familiar. The design, the shape, the way it hung around her neck. It was identical to the one Isabel had worn all those years ago. Victor's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the young woman, unable to speak. His heart raced, and his mind spun with disbelief. Could it be? She turned around then, sensing his gaze. Her green eyes met his, and she gave a small, polite smile. "Can I help you with something, sir?" Victor's mind was reeling, but he forced himself to regain composure. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but edged with urgency. "That pendant you're wearing," he said. "Where did you get it?" The young woman blinked, clearly taken aback by the question. She glanced down at the pendant, then back up at Victor. "It was my mother's," she said quietly. "It's the only thing I have from my childhood. I don't remember much, but it's all I've ever had." Victor's heart raced. Could it be possible? Could this woman, Clara, be in some way connected to Isabel? The pendant was too much of a coincidence. But what was the connection? Was it just a reminder of a past he had longed to forget? Or was there something more to it? He had to know. Victor couldn't shake the unsettling feeling as he left the farm that day. The pendant, the woman named Clara, everything about it felt like a puzzle he had to solve. It was as if fate had placed this woman in his path for a reason, and he wasn't going to let her slip away without finding out more. There was a nagging thought at the back of his mind that refused to let go. Clara's pendant might hold the key to the mystery of Isabel's disappearance. Over the following days, Victor couldn't stop thinking about the young woman. He found himself driving back to the farm on multiple occasions, each time coming up with more questions than answers. He spent hours walking the fields, inspecting the barn, and even talking to some of the other workers. Yet, every time he saw Clara, his thoughts returned to the pendant. Her calm demeanor didn't match the storm that was brewing inside him. Victor was a man of action, not of idle speculation. If there was a connection, he would find it. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. But Clara was elusive, and every time he tried to approach her directly, she seemed to retreat into herself, as though she were guarding some deep, painful secret. Determined, Victor hired a private investigator, a man named Peter Davis, who had a reputation for uncovering hidden truths. Peter was thorough and discreet, and he quickly dug into Clara's background. What they uncovered was both shocking and baffling. Clara, it seemed, had grown up in an orphanage in Austin, Texas, but her records were sparse, and there were gaps in her history that didn't add up. No family, no known relatives, just a mysterious upbringing shrouded in secrecy. Victor's suspicions deepened. There was no way this was a coincidence. He had known Isabel, every detail about her. He could picture her wearing that pendant, the one she had worn since she was a child. And now, here was Clara, a young woman with the same pendant, the same connection to a past that she couldn't even remember. The investigators' findings took a darker turn when they uncovered that a woman named Sarah Evans had been involved with the orphanage where Clara had grown up. Victor's heart sank. Sarah Evans had worked at his estate during the time Isabel had disappeared. The woman had been a shadow in his life for years, a figure who never seemed to fully explain her past. But now, there seemed to be an undeniable link between Sarah and Clara, a link Victor needed to understand. The more he uncovered, the more questions piled up. Who was Clara really? And what did Sarah know about Isabel's disappearance that she had never told him? Victor's determination to find answers only grew stronger. He would stop at nothing to uncover the truth, even if it meant delving into the darkest corners of his past. Victor's obsession with the pendant and Clara's mysterious past began to consume him. Every waking hour was filled with thoughts of his missing daughter, Isabel, and the unnerving connection that Clara might have to her. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in Clara's eyes when she mentioned that the pendant was the only thing she had from her childhood. That innocent, almost painful admission had struck him like a lightning bolt. How could someone be so close to his own daughter without knowing it? And why would Clara have no recollection of where she had come from? Victor's mind raced as he sat in his study late one night, poring over documents from Peter Davis, the private investigator. The man had done an impeccable job, uncovering details of Clara's early years that were both illuminating and frustratingly incomplete. The orphanage in Austin, Texas, was listed as Clara's last known home, but records were thin. It wasn't that Clara had been abandoned. She had been left there by someone who knew her well enough to make sure she was cared for, but never bothered to share any details about her family or her past. Victor's fingers traced the photograph of Clara that Peter had sent him. She looked so much like Isabel at that age. Same shape of the eyes, same soft curve of the chin, and the same quiet grace that Isabel had possessed as a child. Could it be possible? Was this young woman, Clara, his daughter Isabel, or someone who had been lost to him for all these years? Peter's next report sent a chill down his spine. He had tracked down someone who had worked with Sarah Evans at the orphanage during the time Clara had been there. The informant claimed that Sarah had been very protective of Clara, always keeping her at arm's length from the other children. This wasn't just a caretaker. Sarah seemed deeply involved in keeping Clara hidden from the outside world. But why? The investigator had also found something even more startling. During the time that Clara had been left at the orphanage, Sarah had been working at the Harrison family estate. In fact, she had been one of the primary caretakers on the estate during Isabel's disappearance. There was no direct evidence linking Sarah to Isabel's vanishing, but the coincidence was too glaring to ignore. Had Sarah been part of the cover-up? Was she somehow involved in hiding Isabel? Victor's gut clenched at the thought. He knew Sarah. He had trusted her. She had worked for him and his family for years, and in his mind, she had been a part of their world. But now, the cracks in her story were becoming undeniable. He needed to confront her. With the new information in hand, Victor contacted an old friend from his business days, Robert Sinclair, an associate who had helped him manage his affairs when Isabel first went missing. Robert had always been a loyal friend, but something about his behavior had started to feel off in recent years. There were whispers of a past he had never revealed, and Victor began to suspect that Robert might know more than he was letting on. When Victor met with Robert, the tension was palpable. Robert, ever the professional, greeted Victor with a handshake, but there was an air of unease between them. "Victor," Robert said, his voice steady but with an edge of caution, "I hear you're still chasing ghosts. This business with the pendant, the orphanage, it's a dangerous road to go down." Victor's eyes narrowed. He had long suspected that Robert had his own share of secrets, and now, with everything coming together, he felt the weight of those secrets pressing down on him. "What do you mean?" Victor's voice was calm, but beneath the surface, his fury was simmering. "What do you know about Sarah Evans? What do you know about my daughter?" Robert's smile faltered for just a moment. "Victor, I think you should let the past stay where it belongs. You've built a life since Isabel's disappearance. You can't keep digging. Some things are better left forgotten." Victor leaned in, his gaze hard. "You're hiding something. I know you are. And if you have any knowledge of what happened to Isabel, I swear to you, I will find out what it is." Robert shifted uncomfortably, but didn't back down. "Sometimes, Victor, the truth is more dangerous than the lies. I can't tell you what I don't know, but digging into Sarah's past, it's going to cost you more than you're prepared to pay." Victor's resolve only hardened. Robert might be hiding something, but it was no longer enough to stop him. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it. Victor's confrontation with Robert had been a turning point. The warning, the evasiveness, it all pointed to one thing. There was something deeper to the story of Isabel's disappearance, and Robert knew more than he was willing to admit. Victor's next step was to uncover everything he could about Sarah Evans and her time at the orphanage. He revisited the records Peter had found, and after digging deeper, he stumbled upon a new lead. A piece of forgotten information had surfaced. Sarah had not just worked at the orphanage in Austin during Isabel's disappearance. She had also been there at the time when a young girl, who matched Isabel's description, had been seen near the orphanage. Victor's heart raced as he read through the files. It was a faint lead, barely more than a rumor, but it made his blood run cold. Could it be possible that Isabel had somehow been transported to that orphanage and hidden there for years? Was Clara somehow a part of Isabel's life that had been erased from memory? Victor's mind was spinning as he connected the dots. Sarah's connection to the orphanage, her strange protectiveness of Clara, and Robert's cryptic warnings all pointed to a dangerous truth that no one had been willing to face. If Isabel had been taken there, it would explain her disappearance, at least in part. But why? Why would anyone want to hide Isabel away? And why would Clara, now grown, be wearing that pendant? The answers seemed just out of reach, but Victor was determined to uncover them. He knew one thing for sure. Sarah Evans was at the center of it all, and if he wanted to find the truth about Isabel, he would have to confront her, no matter the cost. Victor's investigation led him to a dark and secluded corner of the past, where the lines between friend and foe blurred, and the truth became more elusive than ever. With every step closer to the truth, the stakes grew higher, and Victor couldn't help but feel that he was walking into a trap set by the very people he had trusted most. As he prepared to face Sarah Evans and finally uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long, Victor knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The past was coming for him, and this time, there would be no escaping it. Victor Harrison stood at the edge of his estate, staring out over the vast expanse of land that had once been filled with the laughter of his daughter, Isabel. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had disappeared, and yet, the ache of her absence was as fresh as ever. Each new discovery, each new piece of the puzzle that he uncovered, only served to remind him of how much had been hidden from him. And now, Clara, this mysterious woman who seemed to be connected to Isabel's past, had become the focus of his every thought. The pendant, the orphanage, the vague whispers of Sarah Evans's involvement. It was all too much, and yet Victor knew he could not stop. He could not let go of the truth, no matter how much it tore at him. Clara, still working on the farm, had been distant ever since their initial meeting. Victor couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. She had no memory of her childhood, no real understanding of who she was or where she came from. How could she know that her entire life was about to be irrevocably changed? How could she possibly understand the storm that was brewing in Victor's heart? Over the past few days, Victor had pressed harder, uncovering disturbing details about Sarah Evans's role in Isabel's life. The woman had been a constant presence at the Harrison estate during Isabel's disappearance, but her actions had remained shrouded in secrecy. Why had she never mentioned Clara? Why had she been so protective of the girl in the orphanage, going to great lengths to keep her hidden from the outside world? Victor had managed to track down an old friend of Sarah's, someone who had worked with her during those years at the estate. This friend, an older woman named Helen, had been reluctant to speak at first, but after some coaxing, she had finally confessed something that sent a chill down Victor's spine. "Sarah never told you the full story, did she?" Helen had asked, her voice low and tinged with regret. "She had a reason for keeping Clara away from you. A reason you don't know. Isabel's disappearance, it wasn't just random. It was planned. And it wasn't just about Isabel." Victor's mind raced as he processed Helen's words. "Planned? What are you saying? What does Clara have to do with Isabel?" Helen hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder as though afraid someone might be listening. "I don't know the whole truth, Victor. But I know this. Sarah was involved in something much bigger. She wasn't just a caretaker. She had her own reasons for taking Isabel and hiding her. But so did others. There were people who wanted Isabel to disappear, and Clara was part of that plan. I don't know how or why, but she's connected to it. And if you keep digging, you'll uncover a truth that could destroy everything." Victor's heart pounded in his chest. This was bigger than he had imagined. There was something dark, something sinister at the heart of Isabel's disappearance. But how did Clara fit into all of this? Was she the key to unlocking the mystery? Or was she just another pawn in a much larger game? Victor's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock on his office door. It was Peter, the private investigator. "Victor, I think you need to see this," Peter said, holding out a folder. The tension in his voice was palpable. "It's about Sarah." Victor's stomach dropped as he reached for the folder. Inside, he found photographs, old ones, from the time Isabel had vanished. The pictures were grainy, taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking the woman in them. It was Sarah, standing with a young girl who looked strikingly similar to Clara. They were standing together outside an old cabin in the woods, a place that Victor recognized from his childhood. The cabin was deep in the woods near the ranch, a place his family had always avoided. "Where was this taken?" Victor asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "It's a place Sarah used to go to, before she worked for you." "The cabin was owned by a man named Robert Sinclair," Peter replied. The name hit Victor like a punch to the gut. Robert Sinclair. The man who had always been a trusted friend, the one who had warned him against digging into the past. It wasn't just a coincidence that Robert was connected to Sarah. The pieces were falling into place, and they painted a picture that Victor was terrified to see. Sarah, Clara, Robert. Their roles were becoming clearer. But one question remained. Why had they hidden the truth about Isabel for all these years? And why had they brought Clara into it? Victor knew he was getting closer to the answers, but the closer he got, the more dangerous it became. Victor didn't sleep that night. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and theories, each one darker than the last. He couldn't stop replaying the images in his head. The photographs of Sarah and Clara together outside the cabin, the connection to Robert Sinclair, and the haunting implications of what he had just learned. Sarah's involvement with Isabel's disappearance, the way she had seemingly erased the past from everyone's memory. It was all part of a tangled web that was becoming more and more impossible to untangle. Victor's first instinct was to confront Robert, to demand answers. But something held him back. If Robert had been involved in hiding the truth about Isabel, then the man was more dangerous than Victor had realized. He couldn't walk into that confrontation unprepared. He needed more information. He needed to understand why this had all happened. The more Victor thought about it, the more he realized how little he actually knew about Robert. Robert had been a friend, a confidant, but now Victor saw him as a man shrouded in mystery. The connection between Sarah and Robert was too deep to ignore, and it was clear that both of them had been involved in keeping Isabel's disappearance a secret. But why? Victor decided to take matters into his own hands. He knew where Robert's cabin was. He had been there many times during their younger days. The The cabin, a small but charming structure deep in the woods, had always been a place of solitude for Robert. But what was it about this cabin that had drawn Sarah and Clara into its orbit? Victor drove to the cabin the next morning, his heart pounding in his chest. The road was long, winding through dense forest, until the trees finally gave way to the clearing where the cabin stood. It was as he remembered, untouched by time, quiet and eerie in its stillness. The air was thick with the smell of pine and earth, but there was an underlying sense of foreboding that Victor couldn't shake. Something terrible had happened here, and he was about to find out what. As he stepped onto the porch, he noticed something odd, a small piece of cloth caught in the doorframe. It was an old fabric, faded and worn, but it looked strangely familiar. Victor's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the pattern. It was the same pattern that had been on Isabel's dress the last time he saw her. His breath caught in his throat as he slowly opened the door. What was he about to uncover in this place? What was the truth hiding behind those walls? The answers were within reach, but so was the darkness that had consumed his family for years. Victor stepped into the cabin, determined to confront the past once and for all. Victor felt a shiver crawl up his spine as the cabin door creaked open, the musty air greeting him with an almost suffocating heaviness. The inside was as still as the woods outside, untouched by time, save for the layers of dust that clung to the furniture. The wooden beams groaned under the weight of years, and the faint smell of earth mixed with something else, something sharp, something unsettling. Victor stepped inside, his footsteps slow and deliberate, his eyes scanning the room. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but instinctively, he knew that the answers to Isabel's disappearance lay somewhere within these walls. As he moved deeper into the cabin, the faintest glint of light caught his eye, something hidden beneath the floorboards. His heart raced. He knelt down, prying up the old floorboard with his hands, his fingers trembling. There, tucked in the dark hollow beneath, was a weathered box. It was small, unassuming, but it had clearly been there for years. The moment he touched it, a rush of adrenaline coursed through him. The box was locked, but it seemed fragile, like it hadn't been opened in ages. Victor's breath caught as he reached into his coat pocket for his keys. One of them, he couldn't explain why, felt like it would fit. With a soft click, the box opened, revealing its contents. Inside was a bundle of papers, old and yellowed with age, along with a few photographs. Victor's fingers trembled as he picked up the photos. His breath caught in his throat as he looked at them. One of them was of Isabel, taken just before her disappearance. But it was the other photograph that made his heart stop. It was a picture of Sarah Evans, but this time, she was not alone. Standing beside her was a young girl with strikingly familiar features, a girl who looked almost identical to Clara. The weight of the discovery hit him like a hammer. Clara wasn't just a random orphan who had crossed paths with his family. She was connected to Isabel in ways that were impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't fate. This was deliberate. The past wasn't just hidden. It had been carefully constructed to keep them all in the dark. Victor's mind raced as he looked back at the papers inside the box. There were documents detailing the transaction of property, land that had been transferred under different names, all tied to Robert Sinclair. His breath quickened. Robert had been involved in everything. He had orchestrated the disappearance, kept Isabel hidden, and even planned for someone else to take her place. Victor slammed the box shut, his hands shaking with the weight of the truth. His eyes flicked to the door. He couldn't stay here any longer. This place, this cabin, held the key to everything, but it also held the danger that had shadowed his life for so many years. It was time to confront Robert, to demand answers that he had kept buried for too long. But how? Robert had always been a step ahead. Now, with the evidence in his hands, Victor knew he was walking into a trap. He stood up, his resolve hardening. He had to find Clara. He had to make her understand. She needed to know the truth about her past. The pieces were finally fitting together, and the truth was more horrifying than he had ever imagined. Victor wasted no time after leaving the cabin. His mind was reeling with the implications of what he had just uncovered. The truth was no longer a distant possibility. It was real, it was here, and it was about to unravel everything. He made his way back to the farm, his mind focused solely on Clara. She was the missing piece, the key to everything. If she was truly Isabel, if she had been hidden away all these years, Victor needed to tell her. He needed her to understand the gravity of the situation. But more than that, he needed her to believe him. The years of confusion, the absence of memory, the fractured life that Clara had lived, he couldn't imagine the turmoil she must be feeling. But he also couldn't let her go on without knowing who she truly was. As Victor approached the farmhouse, he saw Clara working in the fields, her figure a silhouette against the setting sun. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. He felt a pang of guilt deep in his chest. What would this do to her? What would it mean for her to learn that everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie? He parked his car and approached her slowly, his footsteps heavy with the weight of the moment. Clara looked up as he neared, her eyes bright with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She had always been wary of him, as if she sensed something about their connection but couldn't quite grasp it. "Victor," she said, her voice soft but steady. "What brings you here?" Victor took a deep breath, his heart thudding in his chest. "Clara, we need to talk." She frowned, clearly sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What's going on? What is it that you're not telling me?" Victor's eyes were locked on hers. "I've found the truth. I've found the answers I've been searching for all these years." Clara stepped back, her eyes widening slightly. "What do you mean?" "I know who you are, Clara," Victor said, his voice raw with emotion. "You're Isabel. You're my daughter." Clara's face turned pale, her eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about? I'm not your daughter. My name is Clara." Victor stepped closer, his hands outstretched, pleading. "You don't remember, but I know. I found the pictures, the documents, everything. Sarah Evans, Robert Sinclair, they were all part of this. They've been hiding the truth from you, and from me, this whole time." Clara's body tensed, as if she were about to flee. "No, this can't be true. I've never known anything but my life here. I don't know you, Victor." Victor's heart shattered at the pain in her voice. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the confusion that mirrored his own when he first began to unravel the truth. This wasn't just a revelation. It was a tragedy, a cruel twist of fate that had left her in a world that wasn't hers. The life she had known, the people she had trusted, it was all a lie. "I'm sorry," Victor whispered, reaching for her hand, "but it is the truth, and I won't stop until I help you understand everything." Clara pulled away, her face a mixture of anger, fear, and disbelief. "You're asking me to believe that everything I know is a lie, that I'm someone else, that I've been living a life that isn't mine. I don't know how to trust you." Victor felt a pang of helplessness. He had no idea how to explain this to her, how to make her see the truth when everything she had known had been taken from her. He could see her trembling, the confusion swirling in her eyes, and he knew that this moment would change everything. There was no going back now. "Clara," he said, his voice firm but filled with compassion. "I know this is hard to believe, but I'm not lying, and I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help you find the truth." Clara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know who to believe anymore." The wind howled through the trees, the sounds of the forest almost drowning out the deafening silence that lay between Victor and Clara. Clara's face was a mask of disbelief, her body trembling with the weight of the revelation that had just been thrust upon her. Victor could feel the suffocating tension, each second stretching into an eternity. He had never imagined it would be like this. He had hoped that the truth would bring some sense of closure, some understanding, but all he saw in Clara's eyes was confusion, pain, and fear. "I don't know who you are anymore," Clara whispered, taking a step back, as if the distance between them might somehow help her make sense of the situation. Victor's heart broke at the sound of her voice, the raw vulnerability in it cutting him deeper than any of the lies he had uncovered. "Clara, I know this is hard. I know it feels like your world is crumbling, but you have to understand, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm trying to help you." Clara shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Help me? You're telling me that everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie? That my whole life, My memories, my identity, are just part of some twisted plan. How am I supposed to believe that? Victor stepped forward, his voice soft but insistent. Because I know what I've seen, Clara. I found the photos, the documents. They're all connected to Robert Sinclair, to Sarah Evans. Everything they've done was to keep the truth from you, to keep you hidden. But it's time you knew who you really are. Clara recoiled, as if his words were too much to bear. And what about my life here? My family? My friends? You want me to just forget all of it? Victor's throat tightened. No, I'm not asking you to forget anything. I'm just asking you to see the truth. You are Isabel Harrison, my daughter. I've spent 25 years searching for you, not knowing you were right here, living a life that wasn't yours. Clara's lips trembled, the weight of his words crashing down on her like a wave. I don't know what to say, she choked out. I don't know what to believe. Victor's mind raced. He knew it wasn't enough to simply tell her the truth. Clara needed more than just words. She needed to see the evidence, to understand the depth of the conspiracy that had kept her hidden. There's more. Much more. I've found Sarah's connection to Robert and how she was involved in keeping Isabel's disappearance a secret. You're not just a victim in all this, Clara. You're the key. At the mention of Robert Sinclair's name, Clara froze. Her face paled, and for a split second, Victor saw something flicker in her eyes. A glimmer of recognition, or perhaps fear. Robert Sinclair? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Victor said, his voice steady. Robert and Sarah were both part of this. They were involved in everything. And I've discovered the truth. They were keeping you hidden, keeping you safe from something, or someone, who wanted you gone. Clara closed her eyes, her hands shaking. I don't know if I can handle this, Victor. I don't know if I can accept that everything I've ever known is a lie. Victor's heart ached for her. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to trust me. You are not alone in this. I've spent my whole life looking for you, and I won't stop now. Just then, a voice interrupted their conversation. A voice that sent a chill through both of them. You think you've found the truth, Victor? The voice was familiar, but it took Victor a moment to place it. And when he did, his blood ran cold. Robert Sinclair emerged from the shadows of the forest, his face twisted into a cruel smile. The man who had once been a trusted ally, a friend of the family, was now the face of Victor's deepest nightmare. Robert, Victor said, his voice low, laced with fury. What are you doing here? Robert stepped closer, his eyes cold and calculating. I could ask you the same thing, but I already know. You've been digging into things you shouldn't. You've been playing with fire, Victor. And now, you've uncovered something that was never meant to be found. Clara looked from Victor to Robert, confusion written all over her face. What is this? Who are you? Victor's chest tightened. Clara, this is Robert Sinclair. He's been involved in everything. The disappearance of your sister, of Isabel. He's the one who helped keep you hidden. Robert's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it, only malice. You still don't understand, do you, Victor? You never will. The truth isn't something you're ready for. And Clara, she doesn't belong with you. She never has. Clara took a step back, her face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. What are you talking about? Robert's gaze flicked to her, a flicker of something dark passing through his eyes. You don't know, do you? You don't know why they wanted Isabel gone. Why you had to take her place. Victor's stomach twisted. Stop lying, Robert. Clara deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know who she really is. Robert laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. The truth? You want the truth, Victor? You can't handle the truth. What you've uncovered, what you've seen, it's just the beginning. If you keep going, you'll learn things that will break you. It's not just Isabel's disappearance you're chasing. It's everything. The people behind all of this, they're dangerous. And you, Victor, are about to find out just how far they're willing to go to protect their secrets. Victor's mind was spinning. He had known something was wrong, but now it was all coming together in a way he hadn't anticipated. There were forces at play here that were beyond anything he could have imagined. Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. What do you mean, Robert? What's going on? Why am I involved in this? Robert's expression hardened. You were never supposed to find out. But now that you have, there's no going back. The people behind Isabel's disappearance, they didn't just want to erase her. They wanted to replace her. And you, Clara, were meant to be her replacement. It was never about you. It was about power, about control. Clara's face crumpled, the weight of his words crushing her. You're saying I'm just a replacement? Victor stepped in front of her, his body protective, his voice fierce. No, you're not a replacement. You're Isabel, and I won't let him manipulate you. Robert's smile twisted, his eyes filled with dark amusement. We'll see about that. Before Victor could respond, Robert reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, sleek device. He pressed a button, and suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the forest behind him. Dozens of figures emerged, shadowy and menacing, their faces masked. Victor's heart sank. He had walked into a trap, and now there was no escape. The forest was eerily still. The only sound the sharp rustling of leaves and the crunch of branches underfoot as the figures closed in around Victor and Clara. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the weight of everything that had happened hanging heavily between them. Clara's breath was shallow, her heart racing, while Victor's mind spun with 1,000 thoughts. He had spent years searching for the truth, for his daughter, and now he was standing at the precipice of it all. But this wasn't what he had expected. This wasn't just a family mystery. It was something far darker, more dangerous, and more twisted than he could have imagined. Robert Sinclair stood at the edge of the circle of men and women, a smile playing on his lips, though his eyes betrayed a cold calculation. Behind him, figures dressed in dark clothing moved with purpose, their faces shadowed and unreadable. Victor's pulse quickened as he realized that they weren't just after him. They were after Clara, the key to everything, the person who could unravel the web of lies and secrets that had been spun around her life for years. "You're too late, Victor," Robert said, his voice smooth and confident, the words dripping with malice. "You've been chasing ghosts, digging into things you shouldn't have. And now, you've forced our hand." Clara's eyes darted around, panic rising in her chest. "What's going on, Robert? Who are all these people? What do they want with me?" Victor stepped in front of her, his body a shield between Clara and the growing threat. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle that had eluded him for so long. He had known Robert was involved, but this was something else. This wasn't just about Isabel's disappearance anymore. This was about control, power, and a conspiracy that reached far deeper than he could have ever imagined. "Clara," Victor said, his voice urgent but calm, "I need you to listen to me. These people, they're the ones who've been pulling the strings. They've been hiding the truth from you for your whole life." Robert chuckled darkly, the sound echoing through the trees. "The truth? You think you know the truth, Victor? You don't even understand what you've uncovered. If you had any idea what's at stake, you would have stayed away." Clara's face paled as she turned to Victor. "What does he mean? What's at stake? Why have they been hiding me?" Victor's heart clenched, knowing the moment had come. There was no more time for half-truths or riddles. Clara deserved to know everything, even if it shattered her world. He had promised her the truth, and he would keep that promise, no matter the cost. "You're Isabel Harrison," Victor said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You were taken from me when you were just a child. And the people around us, Robert, his associates, they're the ones responsible for hiding you. They've kept you in the dark about who you really are. You were never supposed to know. You were never supposed to find out." Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as she processed his words. I'm Isabel?" The question hung in the air, her voice trembling with disbelief. "But how? How can that be? My whole life, everything I've known, it's been a lie?" Victor nodded, his own heart breaking at the anguish in her voice. "I know this is a lot to take in, Clara, but I need you to understand. This is the truth. You were taken from me when you were young, and they've kept you hidden, erased your past. All these years, I've been searching for you, trying to bring you home. And now that we're so close, they're trying to stop us." Before Clara could respond, the woman at the front of the group stepped forward. She was tall and imposing, her face cold and indifferent, but her eyes gleamed with a dangerous intelligence. Victor recognized her instantly. This was the woman who had been overseeing the operation, the one who had been working with Robert all along. "You think you're in control, Victor?" the woman said, her voice like ice. "You're not. None of you are. This has never been about you. This has always been about the bigger picture. And now, Clara, now that you know the truth, you're a threat. A threat to everything we've worked for." Clara's eyes darted between the woman and Victor, confusion and fear fighting for dominance on her face. "What do you mean? What's going on? What are you all trying to protect?" Victor's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. "They've been controlling everything, Clara. You're the key to it all. You were meant to replace Isabel, to take her place in their plan. They've been keeping you hidden, keeping you away from me because they knew the truth would destroy everything they've worked for." The woman sneered, her lips curling in disdain. "You think this is about you? About Isabel? It's much bigger than that. You have no idea the power we hold. And now, Clara, you're about to find out just how far we're willing to go to protect our interests." Victor's heart pounded as the woman's words sank in. He knew what they were capable of, knew the lengths they would go to in order to keep their secrets safe. But there was no turning back now. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not when he had found his daughter. When he had found Clara. "Clara," Victor said, his voice fierce, "they've been controlling everything for years. You were never meant to be a pawn in their game. You were meant to be free. And I will do whatever it takes to protect you, to make sure they can't hurt you." Clara's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. But there was something else there too, something deeper. A flicker of recognition, of understanding. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for Victor's arm. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear. "We need to escape before it's too late." Victor turned to face the group, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew there was no easy way out. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and the odds were stacked against them. But he also knew that he would never stop fighting for Clara, for Isabel. "You're not getting away," Robert sneered, his hand twitching at his side as if reaching for a weapon. The woman nodded, signaling to the others to advance. But before they could make a move, a series of distant gunshots echoed through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of a helicopter approaching. The figures in the circle froze, their attention snapping to the sky. Victor's heart skipped a beat. He knew who it was. His allies. The people who had been tracking Robert and his associates for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The time had come. They weren't alone anymore. The helicopter descended rapidly, its lights cutting through the darkness, casting long shadows over the forest. The armed men who had been trailing Robert and his group quickly appeared from the trees, their guns drawn, ready to act. The standoff had begun. "Get down," Victor shouted, pulling Clara to the ground just as bullets began to fly, tearing through the air with a deafening roar. The chaos erupted in an instant. Shouts, the whine of gunfire, the sound of combat filling the air. Victor shielded Clara with his body, his mind laser-focused on protecting her. "Stay low," he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "Stay behind me." They crawled toward the trees, the sounds of the battle raging around them. The figures in the circle were scattering, caught off guard by the sudden attack, their plans crumbling before their eyes. In the chaos, Victor's thoughts raced. The truth was finally out in the open, but the danger wasn't over yet. They had to make it out of this alive. They had to survive. Clara clung to him, her grip strong despite the fear. "Victor," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. "What now?" Victor glanced around, his heart pounding in his chest. "Now, we fight. We survive. And we take back what's ours." As the battle raged on, Victor knew one thing for sure. They weren't done yet. They had come too far, fought too hard. And now, the truth would be theirs, no matter the cost. After the long and grueling battle, as the echoes of the confrontation finally faded away, Victor and Clara stood together, breathing in the stillness of the morning air. The conspirators had been captured, and the shadow that had loomed over their lives seemed to lift. But while the fight was over, The road ahead was still long and uncertain. Victor gazed at Clara, his eyes filled with unsaid words and emotions he hadn't been able to express for all these years. Clara, now knowing the truth of her origins, still found it hard to believe that her entire life had been manipulated and hidden from her. She felt the weight of the loss, but also a sense of liberation in the revelations that had come to light. "We'll start fresh, won't we?" Clara asked, her voice quiet but determined, as if seeking confirmation that they could move forward, despite the challenges that still lay ahead. Victor smiled, a smile for the first time not filled with pain or fear. "Yes, we will. We'll start fresh. No more secrets, no more lies. And I'll be by your side, helping you discover who you really are." Clara looked into the eyes of the man she had once called a stranger, now the only one left in her life. She nodded, feeling a quiet peace even though the storm was far from over. Their lives had changed, but at least they had found each other again. Together, they left the forest, where the secrets had been revealed. The path ahead would be tough, but now they were not alone. In those moments of quiet understanding, both knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. For love, for truth, and for everything they had left. And so, a new journey began. Thank you so much for sticking with us through this incredible journey. Your support means the world, and we're so grateful that you've stayed until the end of this story. If you enjoyed the twists, turns, and emotions we've shared together, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content coming your way. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest updates. Your feedback and comments are always appreciated, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the story or anything else you'd like to see in the future. Once again, thank you for being part of this adventure. We couldn't have done it without you. Until next time, take care and stay tuned for more.